All right, and welcome back to part two of this episode of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm Sean Meyers, joined as always by Sean Saputo, and we talked Monday Night Raw. Now let's move to Tuesday nights with Smackdown Live, and a similar, way that the show unfolded to Monday Night Raw with the qualifying matches. The two qualifying matches on SmackDown were the one for the men's side between the New Day and the Bar, with the winning team getting to choose a participant. And then the women's match with Becky Lynch, Mandy Rose, and Sonya Deville. So only two matches on SmackDown as opposed to three qualifying on Raw. Nonetheless, I thought that probably the right decisions for these matches. First, we'll talk about the tag team match between the New Day and the Bar, a match that the New Day ultimately won. And now the interesting part is going to be upcoming, because as a result of the stipulation, the winning team got to choose, or will get to choose, who goes into the match at Money in the Bank. So it's going to be a unique decision here for the New Day, because they could go with the logical choice is the guy who's been there before in Kofi Kingston. Great in ladder matches, high flyer, can do all the spots that you want. Xavier Woods has really come on recently. He actually got the pinfall victory in that win against the Bar, so he could be an option. But I think the right choice in this one is a guy that could be a budding star in singles competition. That is Big E. I think that this is a guy that, when you really look at the prototype for a main eventer, I think he fits it. Massive frame, which I know that Vince McMahon always loves, but he's a guy that can deliver in the ring, and he has probably as much personality as anybody on the roster. So I think, to me, the choice is going to be Big E, but I think really any of those guys are going to be good additions to the match. But Big E's the one that I think you actually get the feel that he could really contend for the Money in the Bank. I don't think anyone's going to buy Kofi or Xavier Woods as legitimate options. So that's the way I go, but nonetheless, I think New Day well-deserved to at least get one of them in a match of this caliber.
Yeah, Xavier Woods isn't quite to the point to where it would be believable that he could win Money in the Bank and bring down the briefcase. Kofi Kingston had a run, about nearly 10 years ago, with Randy Orton in the main event scene, and really didn't pan out. But Kofi Kingston has the ability, but a lot of what I've been reading is the talk of having Big E roll with a singles push, and I think that Big E is the best to be in this match, and I completely agree. I think Big E has, the New Day has been fantastic over the last few years. I really think it has kind of hindered his ability to be the main event style performer that he's capable of being. He puts on a great match constantly. Their matches in the tag team division have been great, and maybe this is just a sign of maybe they put Big E in that. Big E ends up, cashing in, and then the New Day is running SmackDown with the tag titles and with the heavyweight champion. It could be something along those lines, but I do think Big E is the much-needed person to be put in that spot to boost him down the line, because he is a future main eventer on the main roster.
The way that the WWE landscape is with tag team wrestling over the past decade or so, it's impressive that this trio is still together, because the tendency for the creative team and the people making the decisions is to break up tag teams, try to make single stars out of it. They do that so frequently. I'm not a fan of breaking up tag teams prematurely, and you and I, Sean, talked about some of the teams that got split up a bit early in recent years. This is a team that hasn't. They've stuck together. It looked at times like maybe their run would be coming to an end, but they found new life on SmackDown. What I would love to see goes against the grain of WWE style with tag teams. I would love for this team to stay together, but to have guys do their own things individually as well. You don't need to have every tag team end with a breakup where someone's turning heel. You can have these guys sort of go off on their own a little bit by, going for singles titles, while still keeping them as a group at times. I think that that's a little bit more of a realistic scenario where, yeah, we're still friends, we're still buds, we're still tight, we have each other's back, but we have our own singles pursuits. We would love to see that, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to begin it with Big E challenging for the world title, and then you could still have Kofi and Xavier, if you keep them together, go for the tag team title, maybe even just work a program with the Bar. But I think those guys could go for their own titles. You know, you look at the U.S. title, I could make the argument that both Woods and Kofi deserve an opportunity to challenge for that. If you really wanted to split them up into different groups, you could even have Xavier do something with the 205 Live Cruiserweight title as well. But the reality is, I think these guys are good enough that they could all do well on their own while still keeping the group together. Do you think this is the start of something along those lines, or is it just going to be an aberration where after Money in the Bank they're back wrestling their tag team matches exclusively?
I hope not. I think the New Day have been in the title scene for so long, and they've been such a staple in the tag team division that they don't need to be together night in and night out, constantly just wrestling tag team matches. These guys are very capable of being in singles competition. Xavier Woods would, down the line, have the most to benefit out of a move like that. But yet again, he may be able of benefiting more of sticking with Kofi or sticking with Big E and working tag team matches and getting more in-ring time than the other two, just boost him, because I honestly do believe that all three of these guys, if they are, continued to give time in the ring and work at the mid-card level or the main event level, I really could see all three of these guys having individual championships. And Xavier Woods would probably be the last one that ends up getting it on the list, but I really could see it happening.
So that is the only Money in the Bank men's qualifying match that took place on SmackDown. And again, the New Day has to make that decision. They have not revealed it yet. I don't know if they're going to reveal it over the upcoming weeks or if they will have it as a surprise actually at Money in the Bank. That's what they typically do with the tag team, where they don't announce which two are going to be wrestling. They just make that decision day of. So we'll see if they ultimately keep it close to the vest, or if they, maybe build a storyline out about them trying to decide who gets it. Maybe they do something comical, or maybe it turns into a fairly serious storyline where they go back and forth with argument. Again, though, I don't want to see them break up. I would like to see them do their own thing as single competitors, but still keep that group mentality when needed. The other qualifying match that took place on SmackDown this week was on the women's side. Becky Lynch against the two members of Absolution, or the former group known as Absolution, Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville. It basically set up as a 2-on-1 match, but ultimately it was the one who prevailed, Becky Lynch, as she gets in. I think much needed for her. She's been on the back burner. She's far too talented to be left out of a match like this, to be left out of the title picture for long periods of time like she has been in recent months. So she gets in. That being said, I think Sonya and Mandy Rose are both going to be very prominent players on SmackDown. Would have liked to have seen one of them, if not both of them, get into a match like this, but you figure now they're on the outside looking in. So, Sean, your thoughts on the decision here to put Becky Lynch in, and how much of an actual chance does she have at winning the Money in the Bank match?
I thought it was a smart decision. I think you needed to continue with the addition of star power for the women's Money in the Bank match. And I think they played this out absolutely correct. I don't think Becky Lynch is going to win, but I think she needed to be in there just to, get her footing back. And I think she did a fantastic job in growing Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville, who haven't had a lot of singles time in the ring. Mandy Rose picked up the victory against Becky Lynch last week, and Sonya Deville hasn't really been anything but a cheerleader or tag team wrestler since being up. And I thought Becky Lynch did a fantastic job, not only with both of them individually, but then also, taking her breaks throughout the match and letting Sonya and Mandy Rose show off how far they've come. And I agree with you. I think Mandy and Sonya are going to be players on SmackDown in the near future. And again, just giving them the singles time and seeing what they're capable of doing. I honestly thought that was a better match than many people may have expected.
So with the outcome, Becky Lynch getting in, and we highlighted what happened on Raw with Alexa Bliss getting in, we now have 4 women out of the 8 who have qualified on SmackDown. It's Charlotte, which, again, not a woman who needs this type of match, not a woman who needs the Money in the Bank briefcase, but if you're looking for star power for the women's side, it makes sense to put her in. Same can be said about Alexa Bliss on Monday. She qualified. She is a multi-time champion just coming off of a title reign, but you get the star power with her in there, and then a newcomer, Ember Moon, who I think will really benefit from being in a match like this. So we're focused on SmackDown in particular with this segment, but 4 spots left, and we already know Ronda Rousey, Nia Jax are wrestling for the Raw Women's title. And we'll touch on this maybe a little bit more upcoming, but Carmella and Asuka are now battling for the SmackDown Women's title. How do you fill those final 4 spots, especially on SmackDown? We know one of the spots will go to either Lana or Billie Kay next week. If you're going to have Billie Kay, and Peyton Royce should be in, and nobody wants to see Lana, so it's sort of a weird scenario. If you do go with Billie Kay, good for her, but Peyton Royce probably the better of the two. And if you go with Lana, man, that's got to be a nightmare scenario to put her in a match like this.
You can't have Lana in that. You can't. She is not up to par in terms of in-ring ability yet, and you have to think Billie Kay pulls it out unless Charlotte, does something to open the door for Lana to be in the match. But, I mean, you can always have that one person in the match that doesn't belong there and just they have no shred of a chance of winning. So I'm going to say Billie Kay ends up getting in. And the 4th spot you would have to think would go to like a Naomi or someone like that.
Right. So, Naomi makes sense. Or if you go with maybe a redemption opportunity, then you could put a Peyton Royce or you could put one of the members of Absolution. Again, to me, though, if you're going to put Billie Kay in, put Peyton Royce in as well or leave them both out. But I think you're right. Naomi is a person built for this type of match with her athleticism. She could do stuff that pretty much no other woman. Yeah. Well, Ember Moon sort of similar to her on Raw, but they have the athleticism to really do some high spots that will stand out in this type of match.
And on Raw,
they got to recycle again, right? I mean, they have to go with some of the women who already lost these qualifying matches, you would think.
I think it's going to be Ruby Riott and Sasha Banks.
Right, with both of them getting second opportunities. So, I mean, they could go Bayley as well, but when you look at the women who already lost their chances, some of the bigger names are the ones that are right now on the outside looking in as far as this goes. But we'll see how they play it out. Nonetheless, back to the match at hand, I think right decision to put Becky Lynch in. That will certainly help her and certainly legitimize the match as well. So there's only 2 qualifying matches on SmackDown. The reason for that is because, in large part, the show is built around the main event. That was not a Money in the Bank qualifying match, but a match that had implications for Money in the Bank between AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. If you're keeping track at home, it was not the first, not the second, not the third, the 4th match between these two in, about 6 weeks' time. To me, that's way too much. The match starts to lose its appeal, especially because these have all pretty much been the same type of one-on-one. Yes, the one was a no DQ, but realistically, same type of match. 4th time around, finally Nakamura gets the pinfall victory. Sean, I want to get your take because you are a New Japan fan, and I know that you were very high on Nakamura and also very high on the match that these two had over at Wrestle Kingdom. But, man, it does not seem like they are delivering to the same degree whatsoever. in WWE, and it's to the point for me now where this match really isn't doing it for me. I mean, the first time there was such anticipation. The second time you wanted to see, would they actually be able to get on the right track and have that great match? Well, now the fourth time around, it's almost like this is just, it's getting repetitive. It's just too much being shoved down our throat, and we knew that with this match taking place, there's already a guarantee for a fifth match at Money in the Bank. This was just to determine the stipulation. Why did they have to have a one-on-one match just to pick the stipulation? Couldn't they have been a more creative way to do it where you're not having them go at it again? Because the fifth time around, it just seems like too much in a short period of time.
The sad part was that the match on Smackdown was the best of the 4 matches that they've had.
You know, my friend said that too. I would say that I could maybe see it that way, but to me, this one didn't have a big fight feel whatsoever because we've seen it before. It was on TV and there was no title on the line. So yes, it might have been the best one, but it never felt like something truly special to me, I would say.
I honestly believe that they are going to have an Iron Man match, Money in the Bank. And it's going to end at Money in the Bank. I don't see there being some corny stipulation like a ladder match or a tables match, or knowing with the way Shinsuke has been rolling with his, lines lately, to face match or something like that. But I really think an Iron Man match is the smartest way to go with this, being that your only matches right now you're having card are the 2 women's title matches, women's Money in the Bank, men's Money in the Bank, and this match with possibly Roman versus Jinder thrown in there as well. So you're going to have time that needs to be filled, especially considering they're using this as one of the main pay-per-views now, one of the main 5. So I think this match could end up being
probably a 3.5 hour, if not longer, pay-per-view. That seems to be the trend. This one could be 4.
This one could be 4. This could be a 7 to 11, 7 to 11:30. So I could really see an Iron Man match being the end of this, where AJ got the victory at Mania. Two matches that ended in draws, and Shinsuke got a victory on SmackDown. So now the score is 1-1 with 2 draws, and an Iron Man match concludes the feud.
If they do go Iron Man, which that's been speculated, Nakamura did not announce. Now, I did see a video online where he said he knows what match, but hasn't revealed it yet. If they go Iron Man, 1, does Nakamura finally win the title? 2, do they deserve an Iron Man match at this point, knowing that these matches really have not lived up to the hype? I mean, that's a lot to ask for these guys to go work an hour-long match when really the first 4, I don't think any of them you could say were a classic match or, even a 4-star.
But here's the difference. If you give these guys 1 hour to do what they can do, you will get a classic out of that match. They did not get the allotted time at WrestleMania. They did not get the allotted time at Greatest Royal Rumble. They did not get the allotted time at Backlash. You give these guys the time, this will be a classic match, and I think that's what they're building up to. Is they didn't, like we've talked about, they didn't want to throw all the chips in the bag at WrestleMania, even though it's the grandest stage of them all that they call it. I think you give these guys 1 hour, you're going to have an instant classic.
And I think what you said there most recently was the biggest factor. I don't think the time constraints were as much of an issue as the fact that they never set up any of these matches to be like the end where you really bring it all out there. They said this is the first or the next in the line of many. So save something for the final one. If this is the final one, then there's no holding back, and you can let it all out there. So I think that, if anything, will be the biggest difference if this match does deliver. But 5 matches in the span of 6 weeks makes it tough to pull off So if these guys are able to deliver a big-time match and the crowd's behind it for a full hour, I will give them full credit. To me, it hasn't been as good as what it could have been, but you can redeem yourself with one match. So we'll see if that happens at Money in the Bank. Anything else in terms of stipulation? Would that be a disappointment to you if it's not this Iron Man match?
Yes.
All right.
100%. I think Iron Man match and concluding it at Money in the Bank is the way to go.
How about like a last man standing?
Nope.
Okay. I think it will be an Iron Man, but last man standing would sort of play into.
They're not guys that. And plus, last man standing matches, ever since they did away with the whole blood and everything like that, last man standing matches are some of the most boring matches to watch anymore. And honestly, with these two guys, they have the ability to go 60 minutes, and you give them that. And I mean, I'm not going to compare it to Okada Omega going 60 minutes, putting on the greatest wrestling match that has ever happened in wrestling history. But this
is Dave Meltzer joining me today.
Yeah. I mean, it is the greatest match that has ever happened in history. If you've ever watched it, it's incredible. And I think this would be close to a 5-star match if you give them an Iron Man match.
Speaking of 5 stars, good transition for me there, Sean, that you set up. A man who delivered a 5-star match in NXT made his debut on SmackDown this past week. Andrade Cien Almas, along with Zelina Vega, as Sean Saputo rolls his eyes. A guy that I think was slow to find his comfort zone in NXT. He came up as a face that people didn't care about. He wasn't really connecting with the fans. They turn him heel. They make him into a bit of a playboy. And to me, the biggest change for Andrade Cien Almas was the appearance of Zelina Vega. She has done wonders for him. She's pretty talented in her own right, and now they are paired together on SmackDown. And after a few weeks of promos introducing them and teasing their debut, finally Andrade debuts over in England, gets a dominant squash victory, but looked pretty good in the process. Probably about as good as he could have looked in the type of match that he had against a local jobber. This guy, I think, in the ring is legit, and I think that with Zelina Vega by his side, his character is one that will at least be good enough on the main roster. People will be interested in him, and he comes up with a lot of hype. So I'm excited to see where he goes going forward. I think he's a guy that instantly can be in your high mid-card, maybe challenging for the U.S. title before long, and he's a guy that, if nothing else, should be able to put on some dynamic matches with guys like a Jeff Hardy, for instance. Andrade Cien Almas will make SmackDown better, in my opinion, but the only concern, and it's a concern that we touched on in part 1 of this episode of the podcast, NXT guys, sometimes they lose the confidence of the creative team and Vince McMahon, and it could go from being a superstar in NXT to being a below average competitor in WWE. Sean, what do you think the outlook is for Andrade Cien Almas, and did you like what you've seen from him, the way that they built him up with the vignettes and now finally having a squash victory in his debut?
I like vignettes. I like the build up to him coming. I am one that I cannot stand every time there's a new person from NXT that comes up that has hype. They always constantly put them in a match with a jobber. I would much rather see, and while I'm not a big Cien Almas fan myself, but I am a fan of his in-ring ability because he puts on some fantastic matches. I would have much rather seen him get in the ring, someone that is a staple of the main roster and put a quality match, and even if he loses, so be it. But I guess, with him being a heel, you can't have him go out there and lose a match on his first night. And you'd see that's the way things roll now, is that everybody that has to come up has to get a victory on their first night, unless you're No Way Jose. And I don't know. I can't stand the whole working with a jobber thing.
How about like a Kofi Kingston? I mean, that's a guy. Kofi was not. And you have it be a competitive match, but in the process, you show how good this guy is in the ring, because in a squash match, it doesn't really show his ability. So a fan that never watched him in NXT, well, what's so good about this guy? He beat a jobber. They didn't even let him wrestle. You put him out there with a Kofi Kingston, give those guys 12 minutes, and Andrade Cien Almas maybe squeaks out a victory. Doesn't make Kofi look too bad. It makes Almas look pretty darn good. But the more important thing is you show how good he can be in the ring.
Yeah. Showing Andrade Almas throw around a 5'7" jobber from England is not getting people who don't know who he is, excited about him. I mean, that's the thing, and I think that's part of the issue is they want to ride on what the fans feel about the person when they enter, and when you keep throwing them in matches against jobbers, you're losing steam right away with the person, because it's like, oh, okay, well, they just made this big hype about this person coming up, and really, what have I seen over the last 3 weeks to a month except him just wrestling local people that he's thrown around for 3 minutes and has had 12 minutes of in-ring time in 1 month on 4 matches. And it just, to me, it ruins the aura of wrestlers coming up. I would rather see NXT guys come up and face mid-card guys, put on good matches, maybe some of them pick up a surprising win, some of them pick up the loss, but look good in the process and have a solid 10 to 12 minute match right off the bat.
So anything else that stood out for you on SmackDown, Sean? For me, I don't know that it's something that necessarily stood out on SmackDown, but something that could play a major role in SmackDown storylines going forward. The report that Jeff Hardy potentially was injured working overseas in a dark match, that could have major ramifications on how things unfold on SmackDown. He is, of course, the reigning U.S. champion, and we'll see what happens. I don't know exactly what the path they were going to take with Jeff Hardy anyway, because he sort of had that short-lived feud with Randy Orton. I don't know if they kind of moved on from that. He lost his qualifying match to The Miz. But Jeff Hardy's a guy that I think big things were in store for him on SmackDown, so if he's injured for any lengthy period of time, it's really going to have to force them to sort of change on the fly, and potentially we could see a new champion crowned sooner rather than later if that's the case.
I was like Corey Graves. I was a big fan of the Royal Celebration, especially the way it ended with Asuka being named the competitor for the title. It's about time, and hopefully Asuka gets the strap at Money in the Bank.
And you know what? I have a terrible feeling that she will not, because if you think about it, she comes in with not a lot of momentum. Since she's been on SmackDown, what has she really done? Not a whole lot. So Asuka comes in not as strong as what she was going into WrestleMania, certainly before she lost to Charlotte. But she's lost a match on SmackDown already. Carmella just got a victory over Charlotte cleanly, and now seemingly has moved on, at least for the time being. I have the worst feeling that Carmella beats Asuka, and wow, that would be great for Carmella, who's solid, but I think no better than maybe the 4th best woman and probably maybe the 5th or 6th best woman on SmackDown right now. It does great things for her. It could ruin Asuka to lose, particularly if it's a clean loss or a semi-clean loss where she's not completely getting screwed over. If she loses to Carmella, I can't imagine Asuka will ever be the same, and I certainly hope they don't make that mistake.
Asuka has to win the title. There's, like I said, you cannot book this match in any way, shape, or form where Carmella even sniffs a chance. Charlotte, one thing, Charlotte, the knee, the injured knee, goal, whatever, but you can't roll that with Asuka. Not with the way Asuka performed at NXT, not with her year stretch before losing at WrestleMania. You can't have, end any other way than with Asuka walking out with the title, or you have ruined Asuka for the future. I
hope you're right. I just have real concerns that the company will go the other way at Money in the Bank. But we'll see. That's about a month away from now. It will be another big women's match joining the women's title on Raw between Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax. It's Asuka and Carmella on SmackDown. That's going to wrap up our SmackDown portion of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. We'll have one more segment this week. I think it's going to be an interesting one, Sean. We're going to talk about superstars who might be seeing their run come to the end. It's around that time of year. They've called it spring cleaning in years past, where with a lot of superstars coming up post-WrestleMania, some guys coming back from injury, you have to make some room, and that typically comes in the form of releases. So we'll talk about who might be on the chopping block and maybe who could be safe coming up. We will have that up next here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.